Welcome to the Women's Sanctuary, the podcast about tending the soul of women, sisterhood, and the rise of the sacred feminine. I'm your host, Arlia Hoffman. Welcome back, friends, to part 2 of my conversation with Julie Greenberg. In part 1, she shared the tumultuous relationship with her father, the death of her mother, and then dealing with her father while forging her own life. Julie's quiet honesty and wisdom shine forth as she shares here the decline and death of her father over several years. She comes to deep wisdom and love for him in his passing. And I pray that as you listen, you'll find hope for the gifts available in any grief journey. Enjoy. So let's move forward to his passing and share what you feel comfortable sharing about briefly about the actual passing and your experiences after that.
Sure. So when I guess it's been like it was 2016. So when my dad was 78 years old and retired, um, without much money at all, like just pretty much scraping by. He'd been thinking about this for a long time and planning it, but in a very haphazard way. But he packed up basically a backpack and his laptop and I think maybe $60. And he moved to Panama. He didn't know anyone.
Wow.
Yeah. He moved to Bocas del Toro, Panama.
It's not like moving across country to California with your 3-year-old.
Right. Nothing like that. Right. Yeah, it was a pretty big, bold move. And that's what he always did. He did big, bold things. Um, so he up and moved his life to Panama, basically because he didn't want to continue to participate in the aspects of life in this country that did not align with his values. And he quickly made friends. And my dad was a poet. You've probably read some of his work that I've shared. So he started a Facebook page and would share his poems every day on Facebook and developed a following. Anyway, just created this beautiful kind of idyllic life for himself in Panama. And about 2 years into his time there, he met a woman who found him through his poems on Facebook, and she was living in Panama City, and she they went to meet each other. So she traveled to meet him in Bocas. They immediately fell in love, and she never left. And within a month of their meeting, they discovered that and he knew he had prostate cancer before he moved to Panama, but he just basically said it's all under control and managed, and I'm fine. So we kind of trusted him, and gave him full agency over his life and health. So now it's 2 years later, and this woman is newly in her life, and she reaches out to me to say, "Your father is very sick, very sick." And that was really hard to hear. But it was somehow really hard to hear from her. I was kind of like, I don't know you. And I had this total block and total resistance to receiving this information from her. And I basically was very arrogant and said, I trust my father to let us know when he needs us to know what's happening with his health and well-being. And it was a few months later when finally he did say, I'm very sick. And it was just kind of like a wait and see, kind of what is he going to do? What choices is he going to make? Is he going to come back to the States and my brothers and I, none of us were really in a position to kind of take him in or rescue him in any way. And also it's just like it's his life.
Mhm.
Um, long story short ish, if you can even make a story like this short, um, in the fall of 2019, my husband and I traveled to go visit my dad in Panama. Um, and I definitely had a lot of trepidation around, like, oh gosh, this could be the last time I'm going to be with him. How am I around, facing his mortality? How do I feel within the context of our relationship? Um, how do I want to show up? What are my intentions around showing up for this time together? What do I hope to give? What do I hope to receive? And I prayed and I prayed and I prayed a lot about just like wanting to just show up fully grounded in love and compassion and just supporting him, hearing whatever he wanted to share. And my daughter and her boyfriend were there. Also, they traveled at the same time, so that was really lovely. There were some challenging, I guess, energetic dynamics around this woman that my father was in relationship with. So that kind of skewed the dynamics somewhat around all of our experience of being with him,
Mhm.
because there was this element of kind of having to mm, manage her in a way, as well as manage our reactivity to her.
Mhm.
That really just, I think, interfered with my intentions of being able to just show up fully in love and compassion with him. And there came a point where, against my better judgment, I agreed that my husband and I would stay together with them in her apartment in Panama City for the final 3 nights of our stay, even though I was adamant prior to the trip, like, we're going to make our own arrangements, we're going to take care of our own accommodations. um, and he was insistent that he wanted to book a hotel for us, and he did, and it was really not suitable. And so there was just drama around the fact that we needed to make some changes and make sure to get our needs met
Mhm.
during our time there. And during those last three, or really the first of those last 3 nights that we had agreed to stay with them against my better judgment, I just got really, really triggered, like massively triggered, um, and I felt like a caged animal.
Mm.
I felt really mm, suffocated, and like I just couldn't breathe. And there was like, I couldn't even mm, make sense of it. I just knew, like, got to go, got to get
Mhm.
out of here. And so when I told my dad that we were going to go stay someplace else and that we would love to spend our days together and visit and have meals, but we just needed our own personal space, he was livid, furious. So here's my dad, in his final, however long, I guess he still had another year and a half, but we didn't know that then.
Mhm.
He was raging at me, Arlia, like the kind of rage that I would see when I was a little girl, flipping out, and literally said to me, "If you leave here, I'm done with you." And I left.
Mm.
And walking down the road, as we were walking to our Uber in Panama, my husband said to me, "I finally seen your father's true colors.
Mm.
Now I know. Now I understand. I've seen firsthand what you've been trying to tell me about your relationship all of these years and how it has impacted you." Because it was terrifying.
Mhm.
It was terrifying to be in the presence of that kind of uncontrollable rage. It was terrifying to walk away,
Yeah.
but I couldn't not walk away. And so we did end
I
up having,
just want to pause there.
sure.
I couldn't not walk away. Even in the midst of that trauma, you knew what you had to do.
And really, ultimately, what I come to understand about that moment is that that was me giving him a gift. It took me some time to come to that conclusion. It felt like me saving myself, which it
Mm-hmm.
was, but it was also me saying, I don't know when or if I'm going to see you again, but when your time comes to take your last breath, you can die knowing that your one daughter is a powerful badass
Yeah. She can
who's
take
gonna,
care of herself,
yeah,
and she knows how.
yeah. And I
It's
think
beautiful.
ultimately how that played out is I came home from that trip. I contacted my therapist that had been my therapist on and off for over 30 years, resumed work with her, and really kind of unpacked a lot of this stuff
Mm-hmm.
around my dad. And when it came time for him to come home, which was a whole ordeal, as you can imagine, um, I feel like we were able to have a really, really beautiful, peaceful, loving time together. It was very soft.
What do you
Like
attribute that to? Is it just that,
I
was
think
he
that
different? Were you different?
probably both. Um, but I really feel like that piece of me really firmly standing my ground and just saying, I love you and you do not get to bully me anymore
Mm-hmm.
was like that line in the sand for both of us that just was like, you know, this this is what we're here for. Like I know that in your heart of hearts and in your deepest place of knowing and wisdom, you know that I get to be my own person
Mm-hmm.
and that you have to let go of the reins. And I'm asking you, I'm inviting you to do that for both of us.
Yeah. So walk us through how you were after he passed.
It's like it was very different from when my mom passed. It was just um this this time of softening. Like there was just
Mm.
such a sense of softness and peace and acceptance. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that like he was so clear and definitive about what he wanted his end of life to look like. And he would just kind of like drill that into our heads. We would have family Zooms. And, he was like, when I die, I want to come back. I'm going to come back as a willow tree, a weeping willow tree. And we were like, okay, Dad, that's really nice and poetic. What are we supposed to do with that? And he's like,
Yeah.
you're going to bury me wrapped in this shroud that I'm ordering. Um, and you're going to throw flower petals into the grave on top of me and handfuls of dirt. And you're going to cover me with dirt and you're going to plant a willow tree, a willow tree.
Mm.
And so we, researched and we found this green cemetery within an hour of where I live. Um, and we just made all of the arrangements per his instructions. Um, and it all just kind of like flowed seamlessly. Um, and so I think, and the way that he died was so peaceful. Like he just slipped away quietly during this 5-minute window when nobody was in the room with him,
As it
which
happens frequently.
the hospice bereavement counselor, I think, advised us that that's very common, that sometimes the dying person will just kind of wait until a moment when nobody's present and just slip away. And so that's what happened, which was really lovely because he had the wish also of um, being given the medication that is associated with the whole death with dignity process. So we had that all in place for him. But because of the legal requirements, we had to wait until a certain day, which was
Mm.
like maybe two, I don't remember exactly how many days, but a handful of days out from when he did take his final breath. And it was a little bit stressful at the time because part of the requirements were that the hospice caregivers could not be in the room with him while he was taking the medication. They could not administer it. He needed to be able to self administer, which he
Mm.
was not going to be capable of doing. So there was a little bit of tricky, like, how's this going to work? We
Yeah.
just don't know. And then he slipped away peacefully, so it became a non-issue. Um, but really, just the time we had together, the 2 final weeks while he was back here in Maine, everyone was here. There was, you know, laughter and storytelling and sharing of memories while he was progressively slipping away and also like um what's the word I want to he was becoming less and less lucid. He was
Hmm.
definitely in this like transitory other realm,
Yeah.
which was pretty beautiful to watch, to witness. um I feel like I got a little bit off track there as far as your
It's okay.
question.
Well, let's talk about what has been your process since he's gone.
um really, I feel very deeply connected with him. I feel held, and I think that that's a consistency, but with surrounding the loss of both my parents is just um, this sense of, well, liberation from all of the energy that comes with that weight of feeling like we're bumping up against their disapproval,
Hmm.
right? Just goes away, and I feel only held and only supported and only unconditionally loved and cheered on. Um, I'm trying to remember, there was something you shared um, when you were speaking about that resistance piece. And I feel like
Mm.
when our parents transition, it's like the resistance goes away. Like we just um, no longer have to fight that inner battle. It's like the
Yeah, or
layer,
external
layer.
battle.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And I
exactly.
have, in the years since my father's passing, I had a similar experience with him. My parents were, um, well, they divorced in their 60s. And I was pretty well estranged from him from the time after they divorced. Spoke to him, saw him a couple of times, spoke to him a number of times, but he had dementia. And so his personality was changing. Um, but in his final days, his partner called and said, it's time. And I had a similar experience with him that you did when I went to say goodbye. He was I'll say transfigured. He was a different person. He was just pure. He was somewhat lucid, but he knew who I was, and um, it was extraordinary. It's extraordinary to see the ego fall away and see the purity of who they were underneath. It was very healing.
Mm.
Um, he was a musician and very judgmental, and I never felt safe performing in front of him, but I sang to him. And for the first time ever, I under I saw the color of his eyes, because we had never been close enough that we would, you know, look into each other's eyes. And I realized until his deathbed, I didn't know my father's eyes were blue. So it's a it was, you know, a gift, as it sounds like maybe yours was too. Those final days of peace and um, a, a shifting of the energy into just, you know, pure love.
Yeah.
So I wanted to share that, but I also wanted to share that um, this similar experience that you have of that pure unconditional love once they're gone. And for, you know, at first I was like, well, that's just wishful thinking, right? We're just going to sweep all the hard times under the rug and I'm just going to feel good because he was he was as if pretending he was perfect or she was perfect. It's like, well, no, that's not it. But I've come to understand that, or to believe, understand in my own paradigm, that that I feel like they are still connected to us because of the love. That's the real, I don't want to say cord, but the positive cord that connects us. And I believe in some way we can feel them because they have entered the realm of pure consciousness, that we are now connected to that pure consciousness and love
That makes
as
so much sense.
as an ancestor. And when I began to understand that, like, okay, so it's not that I am whitewashing my experience with either of them, but I can transform my relationship with them now based on where they are now in the eternal pure consciousness realm.
Well, and to me, I think as I'm hearing you share this, like the idea of pure consciousness realm, tell me if this feels right and true for you, feels like ultimate truth, divine truth.
Yes.
And like, I think we go through life, like so much of the fears we encounter and resistance we bump up against is a response to, a reaction to this yearning to come back to a sense of our highest truth, our highest
Mm-hmm.
sense of knowing, and our most aligned self, like the self that we came into this life to be, that we
Yes.
get kind of like distracted from or taken off course from
Mm-hmm.
being. And so the sense that we now have this greater sense of awareness of this cord, like you were mentioning, that allows us to feel connected with that realm of higher consciousness in terms of how we relate with our parents now, with where they are now.
Yeah. So it sounds like you're saying our higher consciousness is connected to their higher consciousness because the 3D realms of ego and is not in play anymore.
So all that there is the truth and
Yeah.
knowingness of pure consciousness and pure love.
You know, as you move forward after his passing and your understanding grows, well, where is your understanding now of your relationship with him, and what are the what are the pieces of wisdom that you're finding through this process?
Mm. I feel like that's tricky to kind of like pare down. Um, I just feel really I feel mostly peaceful, and I just feel really proud.
Mm.
Um,
Proud of what?
Proud of who I am because of who he was and how, in spite of the hard, challenging aspects of our relationship, um, how he just inspired me in so many ways, to be my authentic self as much as he resisted my authentic self,
Mhm.
because sometimes who I am could be challenging for him because it awakened maybe his fears, right? Of
Mhm.
what might or might not be for me, or what he wished for me, and his not being able to separate, let me be an autonomous self. Um, but I just, there's not a day that goes by that I don't feel, um, a sense of connection with the parts of me that are who and what they are, um, because of who he was and how he influenced me. And I feel really grateful and proud of those parts.
That is uh, that is beautiful. That's one of the places I resonate with. Um, he was My father was also brilliant, and I don't. Well, it was also I had a lot of work around how my mother viewed him, and so through that lens, it was it took me years to really separate her lens and say, okay, that's how she sees it. What do I see?
Mhm.
And to come to that place where after he passed and then subsequently after she passed, to truly appreciate who he was and his gifts and his brilliance, and to be able to just appreciate that and not color it with, yeah, but he was blah blah blah, you know. Eh, because a lot of those gifts were passed to me. And I think the other, well, one of my other personal realizations was how successful he was just because he lived his dreams out, not because he reached a certain level of success that my mother thought he should have or anybody else thought he should have, but that he continually listened and followed his, well, he would say God, his own guidance or his higher guidance to this is what you do next. And
Did he continue to walk a path of, like a spiritually guided path?
he did. It evolved. He was in very much in a boxed himself into most of my life into one identity. But in the last 20 years of his life, he really did 15, 15. He he did stretch and expand and soften into his. In fact, yeah. In fact, he would say, I'm trying to remember what he told me. Oh, he talked about just being having the right just be happy and um, following your dreams, whatever that meant. I mean, there were some of the things he said to me in the last few years. I'm like, who are you?
Right.
Because they were almost so enlightened, even though he was still kind of his same person, but he was happy. Um, and to see him happy made me question what I had been told my whole life about who they were and who he was and who she was. So it, it was a process of peeling off the stories around him, and then after he passed, really claiming those gifts of who he was, but also who I am because of him. There was a lot of judgment around who he was, and because it was all lumped in together with the bad things he did. So therefore, everything about him was bad.
Right.
And therefore, if I inherited qualities of his, which I did, it felt like they were bad qualities. And so to be able to peel off all of that, those belief systems, and say, yeah, he gave me gifts and they are beautiful. And he used them to his best advantage while he was alive. And so, and I can use them now. And so I'm connecting with you in the sense that um, of the two parents, I feel him most strongly.
Mm. It's interesting that you say that because as I'm sure that you've also already gleaned from some of the writing that I share, so for so much of my adulthood and coming of age as I was raising a tiny human, um, I identified so strongly. So much of part of my story was defined, shaped, and defined by the fact that I'd lost my mother so early, and here
Mm,
I was bumbling through life, trying to figure out how to be a mother without a mother and without having the experience of the benefit of feeling mothered by my
yeah.
mother. And I felt mothered in other ways by many other people. Um, so that was just such a big part of my story for so long. And I can't say that I feel one or the other of them with me more. I feel them both so strongly always, but just so differently. Um, and it's been so long since I lost my mom, and I didn't have the benefit of like having an adult relationship with her. So
Mhm.
I feel like in a way I don't I didn't know her. I don't know her. What I know is the way I continue to feel loved, upheld, supported, validated daily by her. Um, but I feel that in a way more so with my dad
Mhm.
because we had the years to develop a relationship for, in spite of how hard it was at times. And as you were sharing about sort of your takeaways and feelings of the ways that who you are and how you feel influenced by your dad, I'm just reminded of how my dad would, if I would reach out to him for support or wise counsel when I was going through a challenging time or conflict with someone close, um, he would always remind me that it's important for my own growth and healing to try to see the other person in light of their best qualities, highest
Mm,
attributes, rather than just focusing on their flaws or shortcomings or this one specific insult or injury. And so
mhm.
that I feel like just has helped me to expand as a being. You know, I remember my stepmother used to talk to me a lot about the importance of being compassionate towards others and the importance of having gratitude. And in the years when I was sort of in the deep, deep end of struggle and strife as a single mom and really kind of identifying with my victimhood story, I was just kind of like, it was kind of like, yeah, 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 yeah. Like, I can't hear that noise right now. I don't understand how I'm supposed to find compassion or gratitude when I'm in
Yeah.
the midst of what I'm in the midst of. But then, as the years went on, I was able to like expand more fully into finding that capacity and creating space for really feeling what it means to have compassion for others and find gratitude. But I almost feel like more than having somebody say those words to me, it's important to be grateful, it's important to have compassion for others. I had to learn it through living it and
Mhm.
feeling it. And um, I feel like it was more impactful. My dad's words were more impactful when he would say, try to focus on other people's higher, highest good and qualities rather than their flaws and shortcomings. That just made it easier for me to almost like touch grace in that
Mm,
way that allowed me to like genuinely feel into and expand into what gratitude means and feels like and what compassion means and feels like. And so that has really been a guiding force. And then
beautiful.
also similar but different just in his later years. I remember him saying to me, I never worry and I never hurry. And I was like, I'm gonna adopt that, Dad. That's good. Um, and that really does inform how I move through life. I
I love
really,
that. Never hurry and never worry. I have a couple of thoughts on that. Carolyn Mace talks about imagining the people in front of her, particularly those with whom she has conflict, wearing a nun's habit or a
mm,
priest's collar, so that
mm,
because she had a Catholic upbringing, so that it immediately brings to her mind their their inner spirit, their the respect for them as a human being and as somebody of God.
it's beautiful.
You mentioned grace. How do you define grace?
Mhm. So funny that you asked this because I was just thinking about it earlier. Several years ago, somebody invited me to share a recorded offering about my thoughts on grace because I
Mm,
often talk about this idea of space for grace. And that's a little phrase that kind of dropped into my consciousness, oh, probably 15 or so years ago during a weekend when my daughter was away with her dad and I had unscheduled time. And there was this sense of like, oh, maybe I should be or I could be doing or going or da da
mhm,
da da. But what I really need, and I tune into like my deepest place of knowing in my body and in my being, I just need rest. I just need stillness. I just need space for grace. Just need to allow myself to be, um, and to be and to feel and to be with what I feel, right? And I think so often we're just caught in this spin cycle of life of go, 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 do, produce, achieve. And that's all outside of our being.
mhm.
I'm reminded also of actually when I was about 15, saying to my mom one day, I was like, Mom, I've got it. I figured it out. I'm a beer, not a doer. And I thought I was really clever because beer, beer, was like the word beer. And so at
Oh,
15, I was kind of like, thought I was so witty and clever. And she just kind of looked at me like, yeah, she was not impressed. But it really stayed with me because so much of who I am is um, rooted in my beingness and
mm,
just staying with and returning to and finding stillness. Um, I really, really savor stillness and solitude and, and quiet. Um, and so for me, that, the more I've come to understand that about myself, that that's what I need to feel balanced and grounded and connected with self. I've actively, I don't want to say worked. I've just actively made choices progressively throughout the years that have allowed me to cultivate this way of life that affords me a lot of spaciousness,
mhm.
um, which enables me to be with my feelings, be with my experience, and write about it, and tune in, listen, um, and try to progressively let fall away the parts of myself or parts of my story that no longer fit or serve or feel burdensome. And I guess that's one way of explaining what grace feels like for me, is just a returning to and staying present
Mm,
with just what is.
beautiful. Is there anything else you'd like to share, particularly about your relationship with your father?
I just feel really blessed. Um, I feel like I know enough to know that I couldn't be who I am without some of the hurdles and upheaval and angst that I've had to kind of wade through and muddle through surrounding my relationship with him. Um, but he was just he was a big, big spirit. Um, is a big, big spirit. Um, wise and beautiful. Just really, he was just a really good, kind man, flawed, imperfect human. But I really feel like I love that until the very end, he really still held close and stayed connected with the wide eyed wonder of his childlike nature until the very end. And I think that's a really unique and beautiful quality about him.
I can see a lot of those qualities you mentioned in you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing about him.
Thank you for asking. Thank you for the invitation.
Before we go, I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about the work you do now so that people they have a glimpse into your personal life, but I'd love to hear about the work you do through Nourish Nurture Nest. I love
Sure.
the melding of all of your areas into one offering.
Thank you.
Say more about that.
So it's interesting. The name Nourish Nurture Nest kind of like fell into my consciousness again, like a knowing. I just sometimes hear things and I'm like, that that stays, that's who I am. Um, and it goes back as far as like when you and I originally connected. So yeah, just I was having a conversation with somebody about the way in which I see myself moving forward in my life. And I didn't know exactly how that was all going to unfold, but without going through that whole process, here we are. Um, and then similarly, I remember in the fall of 2017, I was returning from a walk in the woods. We have this beautiful um, nature preserve right across from our home. And at the end of this walk, I just kind of put my hands up or my arms out like I often do when I'm walking. I just pray with my arms outstretched and hands kind of open to receiving, and my heart lifted and open to receiving. And I just asked, Spirit, what would you have me do? How would you have me serve? And I heard the words, you are to live and breathe and fully embody all of what Nourish Nurture Nest
Mm.
is and means for you. Just be your work, be your service. And really progressively since then, that has been what's happening. I'm just kind of leaning into trusting and following the little sort of spiritual breadcrumbs for clarity and um, direction around how that unfolds. So what it looks like is I do some meal planning and preparation for private clients. I do some nutritional coaching or consulting here and there, and I do some one-on-one work with women. That really looks like just mostly, I shouldn't say just, it looks like holding space for whatever is moving through them and asking to be seen and felt and heard and honored and nurtured
Mhm.
um, in and then exploring ways that surrounding whatever is coming forward, they can look at integrating new ways of responding to and relating to their feelings, their stories, and incorporating practices, tools. So oftentimes it's just like inviting in some breath work, looking at just creating space in your daily movement of life to just stop and be with your breath. Um, and then, we explore nutrition if that is what is asked for or resonant for someone. Just looking at ways to cultivate a greater sense of balance and alignment to return to a sense of wholeness. Um,
I love that. That's beautiful. And it sounds so nourishing and supportive. I can't imagine that somebody wouldn't just be jumping on that for that type of support and being held and finding all the places in their life that can nourish themselves.
yeah. Sometimes it also looks like spending time with women locally or sometimes even virtually in their homes, to
Mm.
just kind of hold their hand through the process of sorting, culling, decluttering, organizing, creating functional spaces that support the way they want to feel. So it's like, let's kind of clear away. I sometimes say, let's clear away the cobwebs so you can let more light in. And when we let more light in, we're able to tap into and see and feel what's there and asking to be
Making
seen.
space for grace.
Exactly. So, really, all of my practices and all of my work come back to that. So, that's really that energy of creating space for grace is really like breathed into all of the ways I support clients, whether it's with food or decluttering or just, again, not just space holding.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's beautiful. Thank you so much. That's a real blessing for anyone. So for someone who feels called to learn more about what you do, how can they follow you or reach out to you?
You can find me on Facebook, just Julie Greenberg. Um, on Instagram, I'm not as present on Instagram, but it's mama.jewels, JEWELZZ. And my website is in progress, but not yet fully ready to go. But you can always just email me at Nourish Nurture Nest at gmail.com.
Beautiful. And stay tuned on Facebook for when there's a website.
Yes, coming
Julie,
soon.
this has been a beautiful conversation. Thank you for joining me.
It's been a pleasure. I really appreciate you inviting me to be with you here.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for being here with this conversation with Julie and I. We will be back again with another conversation. If you like these podcasts, please like and share, subscribe. Feel free to leave a comment or a review. If you have a show idea or want to chat with me, just reach out on the website, thewomenssanctuary.com, and I'll be happy to chat and would love to hear your ideas, especially if you have any feedback on this conversation about fathers and the journey with them through life and afterlife. Thank you so much for joining us. This is Arlia Hoffman. We'll see you here again next time on the Women's Sanctuary.